Hello, we're going to talk today about the point-slope equation, or also known as the point-slope form. How do we derive it? How do we get this new formula that we're talking about today? Well, we get it from slope. Do you remember the definition of slope? Which we've covered before, but it's just that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus, we know it's called x sub 1 equals m. That's your slope. Well, how do we get this point-slope formula from it, or form from it? Well, if this is the definition of slope, all we have to do is multiply both sides by the denominator. We're going to clear the fraction, if you will. So if we multiply this side of the equation by x2 minus x1, we would multiply this side by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. These would cancel out. And there you would have it. Let me rewrite it so it's a little bit easier to see. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity of x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And I won't say sub every time. I think that's even more confusing to say it. So that's how we derive this point-slope form. But we don't write it quite like that. We write it like this. Instead of putting a y2, we just call it a y. So it's y minus y1. And instead of an x2, we could just call it an x. Okay. It's the only change. And there's a reason we do that, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but now I can tell you quickly. This y and this x, when you're done, will still be a y and an x. It won't change. Okay. So that's how we get this formula. But why is it called the point-slope form, and how do we actually use it? I mean, these are important questions. So let me talk about why it's called that real quick. So if we were to have a graph, and we were to have a line on that graph, let me just put a very generic line, and we wanted to use the point-slope form, what we would need is a point on this line, any point. So if I were to look at this line right here, I could see one of the points on it would be x is 2 and y is 2. So 2 and 2. Of course, there's an infinite amount of points on this line, right? 1 and 1 is also a point on this line I could have used. I could use any point, but the reason it's called a point-slope form is because you need one point, any point on this line. I'm going to choose 2 and 2. But I could have chose any. I could have chosen -6 and a -6. If it's on this line, it works. And then you choose a point. And then you also need the slope. The rise over run. And if you have those two things, you can fill this in. So let me show you how real quick. I'm going to choose this as my point, and the slope for right now, I could find it in two different ways. I could either go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and find it quickly, or I can use my definition of slope. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 equals m. Okay, so to find the slope, you do need 2 points. I'll just use these 2 points. I'll let this be my y2. So 2 minus 1 over 2 minus 1 would equal 1 over 1. That's my m. Okay, so I have my m, and I have a point. And that's why it's called the slope point form, because now with this information, I can substitute it into the formula. Here's the formula. Let me get this out of the way. Y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. We're substituting these in. So y stays the same. y1, if I use this, remember, it goes in alphabetical order because it's an ordered pair. So the y1 would have to be the y, which is the 2 in this second 2 in this case. The m we said was 1 over 1, which is the same thing as a 1. X just stays the same. And the x1 is going to be the 2 that's the x, that corresponds with the x. That's it. That's the first step. Okay. So if you have a point, any point on a line, and you find the slope, you can fill this point slope in. Okay. Now there is another step, and I really want you guys to get this down before I show you the other step, but I will show you the other step right now, and then we'll go back and review this first part again. The last steps on this is to just solve for y. We distribute. 1 times x is just x. 1 times a negative 2 is a negative 2. Bring everything else down. When we solve for y, so there's a negative 2, we would do a positive 2. Y equals x. And these cancel out. What's the value of this question? Is it puts it into slope-intercept form. It puts it into that y equals mx plus b format. Y equals m, which is a 1, x, and there is no b this time. But if there were, it'd be plus b. Okay, that was a lot of theory. I hope everybody stayed with it. I now want to do some sample problems with it. Okay. So again, why is it called the point slope form? Because you need a point and you need the slope, and then you can fill it in. So if I were to give you two numbers, like let's say a 3 and a 2, and I told you that, and this was a point on a line, and I told you that the m was a, I don't know, a negative 2. Could you fill that in using the point slope form? We'll start off by writing it. Y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. Okay, remember, the y's stay the same. It's just going to be a y. Minus from the minus. y1 is going to be one of these. Which one is the y? Well, if it's an ordered pair, the y would be the second one. The m is what? Negative 2. X would just stay the same as x. Minus, what's the x1? Well, if this is the y1, this is the x1. You've set it up, okay? This is one skill in and of itself, is setting up the problem. The last step, though, is to solve for y, to put it into the slope-intercept form, to put it into the y equals mx plus b, right? This is the ultimate goal, is to put it in this form. So how would I do it in this particular equation? If you had a y minus 2 equals negative 2 times the quantity of x minus 3, you can get the answer in 2 steps. 1, distribute. So you'd have y minus 2 equals, let's just draw a line here, negative 2 times x is a negative 2x, and a negative times a negative is a positive. And then last step is you want to get y by itself. It's being subtracted, so you would add. These cancel, and y equals negative 2x plus 8. You see, you have it in the y equals mx plus b format. And you did that just by having a point on a line and the slope. That's all you need, and you can turn it into y equals mx plus b. Okay, let me do another example with everyone just to make sure we have it. It doesn't matter what numbers we pick. I will choose, I don't know, 4 and a 3, just as long as it's on a line. And I'll say that m equals a negative 3. So again, you're going to write the point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. And then we are going to substitute these numbers in. Okay, so y stays y. y1 would be the y here. M would be the slope. Notice that I don't have to write it as a rise over run right now. It's just a 3, which would be the same thing as a 3 over 1. But there's no need to write it that way because we're not doing the rise over run right now. We're actually multiplying it. So if there's no fraction, you don't need to create one. Okay, the x is already an x. The x1 would be the first x here. Okay, we get the answer in 2 moves. We just have to solve for y, so first we distribute, because this is next to parentheses. Then we would add 3 to both sides to solve for y. Y equals negative 3x plus 15. We have it in slope-intercept form. In other words, we have it into that y equals mx plus b format. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful, and we'll go on to the next step in the next video and how we would finish this problem.